I've always said, where else could you go somewhere and get paid as much money as you got paid for having that much fun? It was just tremendous, every time you took off, it was just a thrill. And to fly through the clouds, into the clouds, through the clouds, on the top of the clouds. I always look up when I hear one go over. If you've flown them before, you're going to stop and watch every jet that goes by.
In 1986, military fighter jets zoomed into the American popular culture and collective consciousness with the release of the Hollywood blockbuster Top Gun. Although the film glamorized the lives of the pilots and the training school, the real Top Gun program was born 17 years earlier from a set of grim Vietnam War statistics.
Top Gun was originally set up because of the low air-to-air ratio, kill ratio that we had in the war. So therefore they instituted Top Gun, and shortly after the first group started graduating, the kill ratio went way high. Good for us. But it really jumped dramatically, and our tactics were better. Guys knew what they were doing more. You didn't just go in and you and him and may the best man win. You had a plan going in, and you knew what his airplane was. You knew what it would do. You knew what its advantages were. You knew what your advantages were, and before that you didn't. But the fruits of it didn't show for a little while, because you had to get enough pilots out there who got involved and who had gone back to their squadron and taught the tactics to their squadron. That's what the Top Gun instructors do. I mean, the guys that graduate, they go back and teach the guys in their squadrons, things they learned at Top Gun. And therefore, everybody in the squadron benefits.
Ada's own Jim McDaniel, a U.S. Marine, played a key role in helping shape America's best fighter pilots, participating in some of the earliest Top Gun training courses. An ace aviator, McDaniel was called upon to develop Top Gun pilots for combat. His mission was to forge young aviators into the best of the best, as the movie tagline says.
I was sent down to Miramar, where they hold the Top Gun school, and we went through an abbreviated class called the Top Gun Aggressor School. We performed as the aggressor air against all the fighter squadrons. And we were taught the Russian tactics. The airplane I flew was the A4M at that time, which was very fast and very maneuverable. And we simulated the MiG-21. And when I was in Matu, in the Marine Air Weapons Training Unit, we did a lot of flying against the Air Force and Navy pilots. We would take two A4s and go somewhere and provide aggressor air. Because we simulated the MiG-21 so well. We were small, we were fast, we turned tight. The A4 is very tight. It's a very small cockpit. There's not any, you don't get up and walk around and anything like that. You don't move in it. It's just your shoulders are hitting the canopy rails. And it's just very, everything's right there. That's what I liked about it, though, is it got to be second nature to fly it. You knew where everything was. You could almost close your eyes and reach over here and do what you needed to do without even looking at it. That latest A4, we had that A4M, was just super powerful compared to the original ones that we flew. And once you got it down to about 2,000 pounds of fuel left, it was a 1-to-1 ratio. You could take it and go up with it. I mean, and not lose any speed at all. You know, it would accelerate going up. And we didn't even have an afterburner. That was the thing that the fighters always had over us, was they always had the afterburners, but we didn't have the afterburner. We would be working with a radar controller that he would give, you know, we had our controller, and then the two fighters had their controller. And they would put us on a course coming at each other. Ours was mainly visual acquisition. And once we caught sight of them, then it was basically just keep your eye on them, and you know, the people that could turn the best or had the best tactics and use the best tactics were going to win. And if the fighters tried to turn with us, they were going to lose, because that airplane turned so fast, and you just couldn't stay behind one.
As the movie portrays, albeit with an added shot of drama, a school of top-tier pilots is no place for the timid. The Top Gun program was teeming with Type A personalities, all dueling for air supremacy and bragging rights.
You know, working the air-to-ground ranges and seeing if you could, how close to that bullseye you could get. And they have it all on radar back at the squadron, okay? Where every airplane has a pod on it, and it, you know, and through electronics it has different numbers. And so when you come back, you go into the debrief, and here is a big screen, and you can see where every airplane is, and see who gets, you know, who shoots who and who loses and who wins. You can't lie with it, you know. So even though you called that you got a shot, or you had a shot, Fox 2 was Sidewinder, Fox 1 was guns, and if you called a Fox 2, we were trained in Top Gun. Even though the cone was 30 degrees, just so that for credibility, we narrowed ours to 20, to where there was no doubt that we were in the zone, and if we called a kill, you know, that we were there, that it wasn't, you know, imaginary. And but the air combat tactics ranges, those didn't lie. I mean, you could see who won and who lost, and there wasn't any doubt about it. You have to know the airplane you're flying against. You have to know its advantages. You have to know its disadvantages. You got to know your airplane's advantages and disadvantages, and you know, don't let him suck you into one of you know, his advantages. And it's just, they taught you things that I had never really even thought about in air-to-air. And the main thing is that he who maintains the most energy wins. The different communities didn't like each other. Like the A4s didn't like the F4s. The F4s didn't like the A4s. Neither one of us liked the A6s, and the A6s didn't like either one of us. And there was a lot of bad mouthing at the old club, you know, after the flights were over, but nothing that I saw that was real serious. You know, most of it was just in jest and joking, you know, and you always yelled at the fighter pilots as you came in, and you got to where you knew a lot of them. You know, say, you guys had a bad day today, and they said, "Oh man, you were lucky again."
Top Gun was not, however, all fun and games. With the backdrop of the Vietnam War, it was a deadly serious matter. In 1969, the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School was created in direct response to almost 1,000 aircraft losses over North Vietnam during the ill-fated Operation Rolling Thunder. The Navy could see that the North Vietnamese were better trained to fly the Russian-made MiG jets and were simply outdueling American pilots. The objective of Top Gun was to develop, refine, and teach advanced aerial dogfight tactics and techniques. Improving in the skies could truly be the difference between life or death.
The main thing that they liked to do was they tried to turn with us, and they were briefed. If you didn't get a shot on the first turn through, you extend out to where we can't follow you out, and then you come back in. They wouldn't do it. And if they turned with us, they weren't going to make it. I mean, that A4 would just eat them alive. It was a benefit to the pilots under training, you know, that to show them that, hey, you can lose, guys, you know, because usually sometimes when they get to that point, they think you know, they're so good they're never going to lose at anything. And that was one of the things we did, was at times humble them, okay, to say that if you do something wrong, you're going to die. You know, it's that simple. So You do things right, you're going to live.
As is customary in the military, Jim's journey to Top Gun was a circuitous one. His career took him to bases in 6 different states and several foreign countries. There were a lot of steps in the process, but for Jim it was always in the cards.
I've always been fascinated with flying ever since I was old enough to watch airplane movies on TV, and I built model airplanes. I've had my whole room just covered with model airplanes, and I was just fascinated with flying, and I loved all the war movies that had the airplanes in it, to watch the airplanes, and I just always wanted to fly. I was going to East Central, and I was married to my wife, Marilyn, and we got a draft notice that I had been reclassified as 1A. And it just so happened the Marine recruiter came by the college the following week, and I'd always wanted to fly airplanes, so I said, "Do you have a flight program that I could fly with?" He said, "Yes, we do." And I said, "Can I fly jets?" He said, "If you're good enough, you can."
At that point, Jim's path was set in motion. His dream of flying the fastest and most powerful aircraft he could get his hands on started to become a reality. Slowly but surely, he advanced through every training stage required of him, always keeping his goal of becoming a jet pilot in the crosshairs.
I went to officer candidate school at Quantico, Virginia. Once I graduated from there and was commissioned a second lieutenant, and I was transferred to Pensacola, Florida, which is where all the aviators start. You all go to Pensacola for basic flight training. I was there for 3 months, going to the beach every day, basically PT in the morning, go to the beach while we were waiting our turn to start flight training. And then once we started flight training, I knew I wanted to fly jets, so I worked as hard as I could to be in the top 20% of the class, because you had to be there before you were selected, could qualify for jets.
As Top Gun would be later, competition among would-be pilots was intense. Although many would be satisfied with simply completing the training, many more, like Jim, envisioned themselves as fighter pilots. With limited slots available, there was little room for error.
The original airplane that you started with was the T-34. It's just a little light single-engine 2-seater, a very easy plane to fly, and a very forgiving plane. And that's what you started with to learn all the basics of, basically takeoff and landing, first of all, is the main thing. And then in that T-34, we didn't get instrument qualified yet, so we were totally VFR'd. The weather had to be good before we could fly. When I knew I got jets, out of the T-34 there at the Primary Training Command at Pensacola is where you get selected to either go helicopters or jets. And all the helicopter pilots stay there in Pensacola, because that's where the main helicopter training bases are right there outside of Pensacola. And so you find out when it's coming time for you to, graduate from the primary school. You've done the ground school, you've done the flight school, they total your grades, and that's where you find out if you qualified or not. But then it's also not that you just qualify, it's how many jet pilots they need that week, because the advanced command would come down and say, "We're only taking 10 pilots this week." You are assigned to one of the instructors as one of his students, and he kind of looks out for you. And my instructor came by and he said, "You need to get sick." And I said, "I need to get sick?" He said, "You need to go to the flight surgeon and get sick. They're only taking 2 jet pilots this week, and I don't want you graduating this week because they're only taking 2. So I went and got a fever, and he wrote me down a mild case, grounded me for 4 or 5 days, came back, and this week they're taking 12. So I made jets.
Jim was on his way, but it wouldn't be as easy as going from a single-prop training aircraft to a supersonic jet. As with anything as sophisticated as a fighter jet, it demanded a careful and thorough learning progression. These are war machines, not playthings.
And once we graduated from primary, I went to Meridian, Mississippi to fly the advanced training. I flew the T2 and 2-seater, and that's where we got into the program with instrument training, to where they would put a bag over the canopy, and that's where you learned how to fly instruments. That's where you learned how to fly formation. And then from there, we went down, once we graduated from there, we went down for the carrier qualification in the air-to-air gunnery at Pensacola again, back to there, because Lexington was right off the coast there, was stationed in Pensacola, and it would go out and do carrier quals for the training command. And then I was transferred to the advanced training command in Kingsville, Texas, where we flew the F-9s. And we went through another syllabus and instrument training and air-to-air guns again, and also carrier qual in it. So upon graduation from there, you get your wings, and then from there, I was transferred back to the Marine Corps. Now I was commissioned. Every Marine and Navy pilot that's commissioned is a naval aviator. From there, I was sent back to the Marine Corps to Cherry Point, North Carolina, where I transitioned into the A4 Skyhawk. And I was transferred to Beaufort, South Carolina, where I joined my first squadron, which was VMA 324. I spent a year in that squadron going through all the training with it, and then I was transferred to Vietnam. I joined VMA 311 in Chu Lai, Vietnam, and we flew out of there. And we flew the A4E at this time. I started with the A4C, and the A4E was faster and had a bigger engine and could carry more of a bomb load. So our primary mission there was air to ground, to where we dropped bombs in support of the Marines on the ground. And then from there, the squadron left, and I went to Japan for about 3 months, and then I came back here. Joined 214. I basically have flown with, at that time I flew with every A4 squadron we had. 214 stayed there for 4 years. Then I went to one of the schools, military schools at Quantico. And from there I went back to Beaufort, South Carolina, and joined a squadron called 331.
From there, Jim would land at the Marine Corps Air Station El Toro in Southern California, which would soon lead to his role as a Top Gun aggressor pilot at the air station at Miramar near San Diego. Throughout his entire aviation training, nothing was more challenging than aircraft carrier qualifications.
The first landing, your feet are hitting the rudder pedals so hard that they're just shaking on it. And but you do practice landings and practice landings and practice landings, and you have what's called the landing signal officer. The LSO is down there talking to you as you coming in, and he'll say, you're a little high, take off power, and and if you drop a little low, you'll hear him come up and he'll say power, and if he says power 3 times real loud, that's automatic. You just wave off. You're not gonna make it. And you have a lens with a ball in the center, and you're flying on that ball. You're flying line up ball to make sure you're lined up, and then go back to the ball. And if it starts dropping, you add a little power to bring it back up. And then supposedly, if you do everything right, you'll catch a 3-wire. Okay, that's the ideal wire to catch. You don't want the 1-wire because it's just before the ramp. That means you got real close to hitting the ramp as you came aboard. And then if you didn't catch a wire, it's called a bolter. Okay, where you would hear them say over the radio as you were flying, you would hear them say bolter, 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 and that means you go back to 100% power and go back, off the angle deck and take off and come back around again. The landing was nothing compared to the catapult shot. That cat shot is the most wild ride you've ever been. Think of any amusement park you went to that was the most thrilling thing you've ever done. Not even close to this. You went from 0 to 140 in about 2.5 seconds. And anything you had laying up here was in back behind you by the time you got airborne. Or if your knee board wasn't tied down, you had papers flying everywhere, all the way in front of you. But that was quite a ride. That was fun. Once we got to the A4s, we qualified twice more on carriers, but only one time did we qualify at night, in night quals. Day quals are fun. Night quals are scary. You just can't see anything. I mean, in the night we did it on, there was no horizon. It was just totally black, and you just shot off. You shot off that cat at night into total black, and you have to go straight to instruments. And you make the turn on instruments and come back, and then you can look down and see the boat down below you. And then you can get a little bit of a horizon that you can fly a little visually. And then, but coming back aboard that boat at night is, all it is landing lights and the Christmas tree at the back, which is a big T of lights that shows the ramp at the back, and then your ball on the left-hand side. And then when you get in close enough, you can see the red deck lights. But it's just scary. Night quals, you only require like 2 or 3 to qualify, but I got enough to qualify at night. You don't go and do more of them just for the fun of it. It's once you're qualified, that's it. You quit.
Despite the high risk involved with landing a high-speed jet on a tiny aircraft carrier strip, Jim never had an accident during qualifications. He never saw any of his fellow jet pilots struggle either. By the end of his career, Jim achieved all his aviation goals, including participation in the prestigious and effective Top Gun program. He retired from the U.S. Marine Corps as an elite jet pilot with the rank of lieutenant colonel. Before hanging up his wings for good, he did manage to have some fun.
I know I went past Mach 1. You could get the A4 up and nose it over and just let her go, and you could break the sound barrier. I only did it one time out over the ocean because at that time, by the time we got the airplane fast enough, the A4M, fast enough to do it, you couldn't do it over the continental United States anymore. And if you did, your time of flying may be over. When I was a kid, they used to do sonic booms all the time. And, it just got to where, everything in the cabinets would rattle and dishes would fall out and things like that, and they outlawed them. It was just kind of like an earthquake. Normally, when we flew low levels, and we did a lot of low-level flying at between 100 and 500 feet. We had to be well qualified in it. Because initially your training for nuclear weapons was low-level entry, and you would 100 feet was what you basically planned on entering at, and we would be doing 480 to 520, 500 knots right over the ground, about 100 feet. Running guys out of their boats, watching the cows go sideways as you went flying over. It was fun.
A decade removed from the Vietnam War, the film Top Gun acquainted a peacetime American public with the incredible skills of elite jet pilots like Jim. The U.S. Navy reported a recruitment spike of 500% in young men wanting to be aviators after the movie's release.
The photography on that is phenomenal. That was the closest to actual what it looked like air to air, dogfighting of any movie that I had seen or have seen since. I mean, it really did a good job. I mean, it was a little hokey in places, but the actual flying part was well done.
Jim has not flown since retirement. Instead, he has enjoyed a successful second career as a math teacher and recently took the Latta High School girls golf team to their first state championship. For more than a decade, Jim survived the inherent dangers of combat and flight training, and his memories as a Top Gun caliber jet pilot will always be enough for him.
I enjoyed my time in the Marine Corps. I do not regret a minute of my whole career. Everything. I enjoyed the flying. I enjoyed the camaraderie. The old "once a Marine, always a Marine" is true, and you just always have a certain pride that I'm a Marine, and it's just a little different feeling, I think.
View this program again anytime at www.youtube.com/cityofadaok.